Hello there and welcome back to another review. So keeping in line with that, the idea of some of my favourite cult movies or cult movies that people love and are beloved by so many people. Today I thought we'd have a look at David Cronenberg's awesome, amazing sci-fi horror that is The Fly, made back in 1986 and starring, of course, Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis. Based on a sort of a remake of the original Fly movie, which I think was directed by Kurt Newman, I believe was his name, and starring, of course, Vincent Price. Now, this was another one of them movies that I caught late one night on, like, I think it was a Friday or a Saturday. It's one of them kind of movies that I caught, late one evening, and was just completely hooked from start to finish. I mean, this movie has, like, sort of, it probably is up there with probably one of the most infamous taglines in movie history. I think it's definitely up there with the saying, be afraid, be very afraid. I think that is probably one of the most famous sort of taglines to a movie that has sort of ever existed. And I don't think there is a man, woman or child alive on this earth who has not heard that sort of quote, and not a lot of people even know it is from David Cronenberg's Fly movie, but that be afraid, be very afraid, it all originated with this movie. And what is odd about this movie is that it's actually Mel Brooks' production company that actually produced it. Now, when you think Mel Brooks, you think Blazing Saddles, you think Spaceballs, you think Young Frankenstein. You don't picture Mel Brooks, the comedy genius that he is, having anything to do with a movie like this. But it was actually his production company that sort of was behind this movie. So they also produced, his company, I think they also produced The Elephant Man as well. I could be wrong, but I think they had something to do with The Elephant Man as well. So they got David Cronenberg in, who I think prior to this was busy. I think he was working on Total Recall in some capacity, and he came on board on the condition that he could rewrite the script. Now, I love these classic 80s creature feature horror movies. All practical effects, simple story. I mean, you know, a guy turns into a fly. That's all you need to know. Entertaining, great pacing, great leads here with Goldblum and Davis, and the film to me is a classic. Simple story, as I say, just you know the premise even before you go into this movie, even if you've never seen it before. But Cronenberg keeps it so simple, but you get involved and invested with these characters and the story right away. And as I say, I think it is a classic movie. I think actually Pierce Brosnan was even considered for the role of Seth Brundle at one stage. I think even John Malkovich was considered. I think also as well Richard Dreyfuss as well was another one that was in running for the Seth Brundle character, but you know, ultimately went to Goldblum. And sometimes when you think about other actors that were considered for the role of any movie, it does make you wonder how they would have actually, like, how would it have turned out? How that, you know, like the infamous Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones, or... And you think about these people, I mean, John Malkovich you could probably kind of see. I'm not too sure about Richard Dreyfuss playing Seth Brundle, but as I say, you sometimes think of, you know, how it would have turned out, you know, with other actors. But Jeff Goldblum in this, I mean, he gives an absolute sensational performance. Because of the practical effects in the movie, it got an Academy Award for Best Makeup, and rightly so, as they are just mind-blowing, and even now they still hold up. And I love how the transformation of Seth into the Fly. It's a gradual thing, and every time you see Seth, he's a bit different. Something's changed, or something else has fallen off of his body, and it's wonderful the way, especially with the practical effects and the makeup and the prosthetics and everything, how that gradual change is. Like, it happens in stages. Like, every time we see him, he has changed, and his appearance gets more and more grotesque as the film goes on. It's just great. I mean, it's just absolutely great stuff. I mean, make no mistake, this is how you do a remake, and this is how you take a movie, remake it, bring it slap bang up to date, put a fresh spin on it, and above all else, just make it thoroughly entertaining. To that end, Cronenberg and his team should be applauded, because this is how, like, sort of a remake or a rehash should be done. Like, to say, to give the audience something new in a story they sort of may know already, but to give the audience something fresh, put some new blood into it, and as I say, it really does pay off really well. But as I say, the team should be applauded here, especially Cronenberg and Jeff Goldblum, who just gives a fantastic performance here. I mean, like nowadays, where they remake things that didn't need remaking, or rehashing something that only came out a few years ago, like when they remade RoboCop. You know, did we really need a remake of RoboCop? I mean, there is a big difference between remaking something for a good reason and just remaking something just because you can, and because, to hell with it, we can remake that now. And that's what a lot of the time, especially nowadays with movies, they just remake things just for the sake of it. Let's remake that. Nobody wanted it. Nobody asked for it. Didn't even need a remake, but that's, they just remake things for no reason. Many hail this movie. It's not only a great movie, it often gets put on these best films of the 80s list as well. Yes, it is a horror movie, and loads of metaphors you can take from Seth's transformation, like sort of the aging process and how we all turn into someone else that is unrecognisable, or like from how we used to be. There's a lot of analogies you could sort of apply to this movie. Many of the time, Jeff Gold, I think at the time Jeff Gold was even going to be nominated for an Oscar for his role in the movie, but that didn't happen because at the time they didn't really honour sort of horror movies that much. Sort of awards and things like that. The horror movies were not necessarily sort of the kind of movies that were sort of praised. I mean, they had an audience, don't get me wrong, but I think that because of the time, they didn't sort of honour them as much as they maybe should have done. But yeah, it's like a creature feature with lots of gore, but at its heart there is a romance in this movie and a tragedy. And do you know another thing I love about it? It's 96 minutes, right? It's 96 minutes. As I've said in many reviews, I don't want to be sitting there for 3 hours. I do not want to be watching a movie for 3.5 hours. When a film is over and done within 90 to 100 minutes, that's how it should be. That's how films used to be. I understand sometimes movies, they need to be a bit longer. They need to have a bit more of a longer running time. But when a film is like The Fly, which, this is such a contained movie, the story starts straight away, and it's just under 100 minutes of pure, like, sort of creature feature, sci-fi, horror entertainment, and it's just a ball from start to finish. Yes, there was a sequel to this film, not directed by Cronenberg, but that's for another time. So today we're just going to be looking at the original Fly movie. Now, first thing is, what I love about this movie is how it just begins right away. It just instantly starts. There's no like sort of 20-minute long setup or anything like that. Like, you are just thrown right in there. We meet Seth Brundle talking to Veronica, talking about what he is working on at this like press event. Like, right there, the film begins, which I love. It just doesn't mess around. So Ronnie, as she's known, is like she's like a science journalist and looking for her next big scoop, as reporters in these kind of movies usually are. That's like I mentioned, like a couple of my previous reviews. There's always a reporter, a journalist, somebody to do with the media, or they know somebody is to do with the media. More often than not, there is a reporter usually in a film, give or take. There's so many movies where there's a reporter involved. She agrees to go back to his, and he shows her like the teleporters that he's got, or the telepads, telepods, whatever you want to call them. And Goldblum plays the character with that right amount of geekiness and like neediness, but he doesn't sort of overdo it. He plays the role of Seth really well. She gives him one of her stockings that he can use for sort of demonstration purposes. Bartok Industries is the company that are funding the project, and she works for Particle magazine. So after this, she goes with a tape she recorded to her boss, Stathis, who is also her ex, I might add. So we got a whole sort of he's my ex, and that we got that whole story going on. Wouldn't you know it? Thinking that she has something that he thinks that Seth Brundle is conning her. So Seth turns up to where she works and takes her for like a cheeseburger. And I think at this point as well, even in real life, I think Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis were actually a couple at this point, or they were dating or together or something like that, and that might explain why the chemistry between the two is actually quite good, because, as I say, if they were dating in real life and actually a couple, that would have paid off and shown on camera as well, which I think it does. So whilst taking her out for lunch, he informs her that he can only teleport like inanimate objects, and his whole idea is to like, let's make a book and you can document it. He wants her on board, like, this process, I want you on board, you can document it, you can record everything I'm doing, and we can make a book. So Stathis, as he is so hung up on Ronnie and a bit of a nut job, goes to hers to take a shower, as he still isn't quite over her. Like, you hate this guy initially. Like, you think, oh God, you think he's such a sleaze, played by John Getz, and does have a bit of a character arc where he does actually become sort of a good guy near the end of the movie. He sort of has a redemption, largely due to Seth Brundle's transformation, but even still, he does sort of become... You sort of are on his side, and then Seth Brundle becomes sort of an entity, sort of onto his own. Not only does he go to hers to take a shower, he won't give her her keys back. I mean, he's such a slime ball, such a sleaze. You just hate him right away, this guy. So Seth somehow gets a baboon to use on the teleport, and the poor thing gets turned inside out. Again, the effects in this movie are really good and hold up so well. Even now, watching it again recently, practical effects all the way. I've said it hundreds of times before. I know sometimes CGI is needed. Sometimes we need green screens and computer effects, but practical effects are always, they pay off more, they look better, they just, as I say, they just work. And especially with a film like this, it's like a perfect example of that. So what seems like the first day, we have to have the romance between our two leads, and she is like, you are very cute. They have a kiss and get close, and she wants to eat him up, she says. She just wants to eat Seth up, as she says in the dialogue. So he teleports one half of the steak and cooks them both, and the teleported half sort of tastes synthetic, so he comes to the conclusion that his machine doesn't understand human tissue. I mean, duh, of course it doesn't understand human tissue. You know, and the great thing is as well with this, talking about that, there's no bogged down of like sort of science talk or techno babble or anything like that. It's all kept really simple, so you as a viewer can just take it for what it is at face value, and just, like I say, just get on with the story. So whilst this is going on, her widow ex is following her and spying on her like some obsessed creep, and this guy's like mad jealous. It's fun. There is a funny line though when Ronnie says to him, "I'm finally onto something big," and he replies like, "What? His cock?" So that's where his mind goes, which always did make me laugh. So Seth begins to reprogram the machine and can now teleport a baboon. Ronnie wants a holiday, and Staffy has sent a copy of a cover story that he's going to print on Seth, like to his place though. Seth and Ronnie wanted to keep it both under wraps, but Staffy's is like, I'm going to print it as a cover story, basically just to annoy her because he's just that kind of guy. I mean, why isn't Seth worried that sending things to like Staffy's, like, why isn't Seth worried that Staffy's is sending things to his place for Ronnie? Like, you know, if he's got my address and everything, he doesn't really seem too concerned about that. I mean, they're meant to be keeping it a secret and everything. So Staffy's sort of mellows and has done some digging and tells Ronnie to just keep him informed. So now he's sort of up more than okay with Ronnie carrying on with what she's doing. So you start to think he is okay, and then he comes out, you think he's okay at this point, then he comes out with the line, "Do you want to have sex?" So you think, okay, he's sort of seen the lie, he's on her side now, and then he just goes straight to sex. Then right away you hate the guy again. Anyway, he sort of lowered his threat at this point. He was going to print the cover story, he sort of lowered his threat. Seth being jealous of her and Staffis being jealous of her and Seth, as Ronnie is just wanted by everyone, it seems. Anyway, in his drunken state, Brundle thinks, to hell with it, I'm going in. He thinks, right, I'm drunk, I'm jealous, I'm mad at her, and he decides to teleport himself. Of course, there is a fly in there with him. I mean, we all know that. We know the story. I mean, I know he didn't see it. Not sure why he couldn't hear it, unless it was one of them sort of silent flies. But if you've got a fly around your house, you tend to, or near you, you can sort of hear it. But like I say, whatever. For the most part, flies do make a noise, and maybe maybe the teleports were loud or something. So as he comes out, so far the teleportation seems successful. He tells Ronnie that he got drunk and jealous, and at night he's able to catch a fly with his eyes closed. Seth can now do handstands and gymnastics on this. He randomly has this metal bar in his apartment. He's got this metal bar that's just randomly there for no other reason. It just appears at his place. I mean, it's funny that. I will say it's also one of them movies that not only does it not need to be long, but sometimes it's another fine example of sometimes you don't need a lot of characters. This film basically just has 3 characters in it from start to finish. You've got Staffis, Ronnie and Brundle, and that is it. It's one of them movies you do not need a lot of characters. I mean, I say it only has 3 and it's still really entertaining. So they go for a coffee and Seth just can't get enough sugar and is all hopped up. We see them having sex and he has blemishes on his face and she feels like hairs on his back. Though his temper and mood swings are highly unstable, calls her an effing drag as he wants to go. He wants her to go through and she won't. I mean, too right, because he starts to act really weird. So he can't get enough sugar and things like that. But he's determined, to sort of let her go through. Wants her to go through. And she notices he is changing, that something went wrong. The pacing of this movie is what really works as well. that it's one of them movies that I can honestly say, from start to finish, there's hardly seems any filler. There's hardly any scene that goes on too long where you think didn't really need that scene, or that doesn't advance the plot that much. Every scene is sort of warranted and needed, and as I say, it doesn't keep you waiting, just cruises along at quite a fast pace, but never to the point it's like moving too fast or too slow. It's got a nice, really great balance to it. So Seth storms out in a huff and naturally goes to challenge some guys to an arm wrestle in a bar. So he snaps the bones in this guy's arms and in his arm, and this girl there agrees to go back to his. I guess she likes people that break arms and sort of assault people and have scars and blemishes all over their faces. So they spend the night at his, and Ronnie turns up and says the infamous line from the movie, the "be afraid, be very afraid." She tells Seth he looks bad, he smells bad, and she has had like sort of the hairs from his back analysed, and the lab says they are sort of insect hairs. So he throws her out and then realises his teeth are falling out. He has pus in his hands and that his nails are coming off. But as I say, really great effects. I mean, this is really great, fun stuff in that classic 80s horror style. And I say, Cronenberg, this movie, it's just a must watch. It's a must see. I say, his teeth are falling out and everything. As I say, he had pus in his hands, he's got his nails coming off. So he finds out that a fly was in there with him and that they fused together. So 4 weeks pass at this point, and he asks Ronnie to come and see him, and he looks like crap. When she goes to see him, he looks absolutely like crap. Again, awesome effects. So he throws he throws up over a donut, and then his ear like falls off, and it's here where the film, if it wasn't gross enough already, it definitely is now. It's one of them moments where it's like, okay, this is becoming disgusting. So Ronnie tapes him to show Stathis. Brundle can now sort of walk on the ceiling and says he has now become Brundlefly, as he calls it. And Ronnie shows Stathis the tape of how Seth breaks down food, and Ronnie finds out she is pregnant with Seth's baby. So that I love the pregnant story. I think that's a bit of a cliffhanger. It's sort of where you think, oh my god, she's pregnant with his baby. And it, as I say, Cronenberg does sort of make the most of it, but he doesn't go overboard with that idea. We do have like the fantasy sequence where she like gives birth to this like giant maggot. As I say, if you wasn't creeped out to begin with, you should be at this point, but it's just all fun. It's just so much fun. So she goes to see him and look at the wonderful performance from Davis here, the way she breaks down as Seth is almost like fully transformed. And take nothing away from Geena Davis in this movie. She really is, fantastic in this movie. I say the way she breaks down when she sees him. Seth tells her to leave as he may hurt her, and she wants an abortion at this point. And Stathis takes her to have an abortion, and she gets kidnapped by Seth after he jumps through the window. He doesn't want her to kill the baby, as that's all that is left of him, and she is worried like it might be a mutant of some kind, which is fair enough. I think that's warranted. I think that's a just cause and for concern. I mean, I would say that's rational. I would say that is definitely rational. But this is where, sort of Stathis has become sort of the good guy at this point, because like I say, Brundle is just checked out, right? Brundle's left the building. So Stathis arrives complete at Brundle's, complete with shotgun, and Seth barfs all over him and goes to eat him. Ronnie makes him stop, and now he wants to fuse himself with Ronnie and the baby. Then we get that final awesome transformation with his skull splitting open as well. Staffy comes to and blasts the pod cables, and it really, it's quite sad at the end, despite all the grotesque and how disgusting the film is. It is quite sad at the end with Brundlefly sort of crawling out and putting the shotgun to his head that Ronnie is holding, as he wants sort of out now. He's like, look, just kill me, I want out. And excuse me, she sort of blasts him away, not sure about the baby. We assume she sort of had an abortion, I think it's safe to assume. But I say I will, if as to get through all these classic movies, I will eventually get round to reviewing The Fly 2. And I love how the film just sort of tells its story. And it just ends. It just ends right there. It's just one of these films. It's done what it needed to do. It's told the story, 3 characters, start to finish, 96 minutes, and it's just all squeezed in, and it all just fits and works perfectly. It flows really well, this film. Great performances, great effects, simple story, gory, fun, and it's just a must-see 80s movie. So I will, like I say, we'll get around to reviewing Fly 2 and some more Cronenberg for you. But if you haven't seen The Fly, please make sure to go out and check out one of the best movies, in my opinion, from the 80s. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.